My mother-in-law and sister called me a freeloader while I secretly paid their bills. They threw me and my son out. They'll regret it. My life was rather straightforward until Jake came around. I worked as a fitness trainer at a neighborhood gym, where I helped others get into shape. It kept me busy enough not to think about the absence of drama in my personal life. Everything changed the day Jake stepped into my gym. "Hey, I'm looking to switch up my routine. Got any killer moves to start with?" he inquired, his tone light but his stare serious. I gave him a once-over. He wasn't your typical rookie, unsure which machine to try first. No, he appeared to know his way around a gym but was looking for something more. "Sure," I said, directing him to a set of weights. "Let's see what you've got." The initial session turned into a week. Then a month. Our casual conversations became longer and more personal. Jake owned a modest family restaurant known for its authentic Italian cuisine. "It's all about the sauce," he'd explain. "And nobody makes it like my mom." He spoke about his mother with admiration and frustration, hinting at strong family ties. He surprised me one afternoon as we finished a particularly strenuous workout. "Listen, Emily, I've been thinking, how about dinner at my place? You can meet my mom and try that sauce I keep bragging about." I paused, more out of surprise than disinterest. "Yeah, why not? I'm curious if it's as good as you claim." Dinner was cozy. The food was fantastic, and the company was surprisingly comfortable. His mother, Anna, smiled warmly and laughed heartily, but her eyes seemed to size me up with each glance. Sophia, his younger sister, also stopped by. Her presence was more prickly, her remarks crisp and rapid. "So, Emily," Sophia began, a sneer flashing on her lips as she examined the muscles I had worked so hard to develop. "Jake tells us you're quite the fitness guru. Ever deal with hopeless cases, or do you just make the fit fitter?" I chuckled and took her jab in stride. "I believe everyone has potential. It's all about finding the right motivation." Jake became a continuous presence in my life. He consistently arrived at the gym at the same time and always found an excuse to talk a bit longer. "You know, I never believed in fate or any of that stuff," he admitted one evening as we closed the gym together. "But meeting you, maybe I was wrong." His statements were a combination of gruff charm and clumsy earnestness. It was refreshing. Despite the niggling voice in my head telling me to take it slowly, I found myself falling for him, hard and quick, like a rookie carrying too much weight without a spotter. One frigid evening, as we went to our cars, he came to a halt and turned to face me, his demeanor solemn. "Emily, I'm not good at this fancy talking, and I don't have a smooth line to throw your way, but I like you, a lot. What do you say we make this official?" It was abrupt and honest. No games. There will be no delaying the inevitable. That was Jake, straightforward and all in. I grinned as my heart pounded in my chest. "I say yes. Let's see where this goes." And with that, I was no longer merely a fitness trainer at the neighborhood gym. I was Jake's girlfriend, and eventually, his wife. Moving into Jake's mother's house shortly after we married was not exactly what I had envisioned for our happily ever after. Jake explained that it was essential to him because of his familial links. But living with his mother, Anna, and sister, Sophia, was difficult from the beginning. They did not hide their unhappiness with my entering the family, and things became more tense by the day. The house was usually busy, yet I somehow ended up with more than my fair share of responsibilities. After a long day at the gym, I'd go home to an endless list of responsibilities. The old washing machine was a nightmare. It broke down so frequently that I half joked it was personal against me. Nobody else seemed to notice or care, particularly Anna and Sophia. I recall one evening after dinner, I was attempting to fix that dreaded machine when I overheard them conversing in the kitchen. "She doesn't even know what she's doing," Sophia said, laughing without lowering her voice. "Watch, she'll flood the basement next." Their laughter rang down the corridor, wounding more than I cared to confess. I bit my tongue and concentrated on the task at hand. It was not just the washing machine, it was everything. From cooking to cleaning, my efforts were simply another source of fun for them. Cooking was the worst. Italian cooking was revered in this household, and my attempts were deemed blasphemous. I tried to follow Anna's recipes exactly, but nothing seemed to work. Sophia lurked in the doorway one night while I was struggling with a seemingly simple spaghetti recipe. "Is that supposed to look like that?" she inquired, a sneer crossing her lips. "It's nothing like Mom's." I gritted my teeth and stirred the sauce, which wouldn't thicken. "Well, I'm trying my best here." Sophia snorted. "Maybe your best isn't good enough. Did you ever think of that?" I wanted to respond, to defend myself. But what was the point? Everything would remain the same. Jake appeared to shrink slightly whenever his sister or mother chastised me. He never stood up for me. His quiet was as audible as their laughter. "Hey, Emily, just leave it," Jake said quietly later, attempting to avoid confrontation. "It's not worth it." Dinner time was a hassle. I had arranged the dishes on the table in the hopes of having a tranquil supper, but it seemed like I was sitting in a lion's den. "You know, in Italy, they'd probably ban you from the kitchen for this," Anna joked as she tried my food, and the others laughed along. "Yeah, maybe stick to what you know, gym stuff," Sophia would say, distributing the salt as if it were a peace gift I did not deserve. I'd nod, grin, and swallow the hurt, my irritation simmering like the sauce that never worked out. Living with Jake's family made each day feel like a war I was unprepared for. As my pregnancy progressed, the housework, which already felt like it was all on me, became increasingly stressful. Instead of receiving assistance or sympathy from Anna and Sophia, I sensed their hostility grow worse. One afternoon, I attempted to sweep the living room while moving slower than normal due to my increasing tummy. Anna strolled in, regarded me for a bit, and then gave out a sigh of displeasure. "Emily, you missed a spot over there, and look at how slow you're moving. This house is going to fall apart at this rate," she observed, pointing to a corner I hadn't yet arrived at. I straightened up, feeling a tightness in my back. "I'm doing the best I can, Anna. It's a bit harder with the baby," she scoffed, shaking her head. "In my time, we didn't let a little thing like pregnancy slow us down. You need to toughen up." The lack of sympathy hurt, and I bit my tongue to avoid snapping back. Sophia fared no better. Later that day, as I was folding laundry, she entered the room and began flipping through the clothing I had just carefully put. "You do know these aren't folded right, don't you? They should be able to stand up on their own, like how Mom taught us. Here, let me show you again." She tossed the shirt she was holding back into the pile, undoing what I had previously done. Then, with precise movements, she refolded the same garment. I felt my frustration increase. "Sophia, I appreciate the lesson, but I've folded clothes before. I'm not an idiot." She only raised her brow, a cold smile flashing on her lips. Could have fooled me. But hey, if you're okay with being mediocre, who am I to argue? Her words felt like a slap. For a time, I just stood there, watching her make my efforts appear futile. It was the same with cooking. Every dish I tried was met with criticism or downright ridicule, especially if I tried to create something Italian. One evening, I decided to try again, this time with a basic pasta dish that I believed I had nailed. Sophia arrived into the kitchen just as I was stirring the soup. "What's that supposed to be?" she inquired, staring into the pot with a doubtful expression. "It's spaghetti carbonara." "I thought it might be nice for dinner," I added, hoping for a difference in her typical gruff tone. She took a fork, tossed some pasta on it, and tasted it with an exaggerated distaste. "Nice? This is what you call nice? I wouldn't feed this to the dog, it's all wrong." I banged the pot's lid down slightly harder than necessary. "Well, it's what's for dinner. If you don't like it, you're welcome to make something else." Every day, the tension in the house increased, and Jake's absence exacerbated the situation. He was usually at the restaurant, always busy. When he was at home, he avoided all conflicts. When I tried to tell him about how his sister and mother treated me, he would just sigh and say something like, "I know it's tough, Emily, but try to hang in there. They'll warm up to you eventually, just give it time." After giving birth to my kid, I hoped things would improve. But the truth was quite the contrary. I had gained a significant amount of weight during my pregnancy, which became their new source of mocking. "Look at how much she's eating," Anna would chuckle as I tried to fuel myself for breastfeeding. "Are you feeding a child or a small army?" One day, as I was feeding my kid in the living room, I heard Sophia imitate a cow mooing from the kitchen. The sound cut through me. Tears stung my eyes. It was obvious that they considered me as nothing more than a cow, a utility for my son. I reached a breaking point. The relentless ridiculing and frigid treatment at home became unbearable. I needed a place for myself, where I wasn't just the scolded daughter-in-law or the underappreciated wife. That is when I decided to create my own YouTube channel and Instagram page. One morning, while Jake was at the restaurant and Sophia was out shopping, I put up my old camera in the corner of our tight guest room as my new impromptu gym. "I'm doing this," I whispered to myself while adjusting the angle. "For me. Not for them." I began filming easy training videos that could be done at home, particularly appealing to moms like myself who couldn't always get to the gym. Talking to a camera felt strange at first, as if I were addressing an audience who was interested in what I had to say. However, it soon became my haven. The first several videos were amateurish, with stiff commentary. "Hey everyone, it's Emily here. Bringing you a quick 10-minute workout, perfect for busy moms. Let's get started. But as time passed, my follower count increased, as did my confidence. I bought a better camera, watched online courses on lighting and editing, and my little project began to take shape, something wholly mine. Sophia barged into the room one afternoon while I was filming a low-impact exercise sequence for a new video. "What the hell are you doing?" she said, her gaze jumping from the camera to mine. "You turning our home into your personal TV show now?" I paused the tape, my heart racing, not from the workout, but from the confrontation. "Yes, I am actually. It's something important to me. I need something of my own." Sophia grumbled and looked about with scorn. "You think you're some kind of star? Please. Get over yourself, Emily." Her words stung, but I was getting better at dealing with her jabs. "Well, it's not like I have your approval for anything else around here. I might as well do one thing I enjoy." Sophia rolled her eyes and marched away. But I didn't stop the camera for long. I resumed my session with a stronger voice than before. My digital profile rose, and so did the prospects. Brands began contacting me, offering free things to include in my movies. Then came the offers to sponsor posts. The first time a brand offered me money to promote their product, I was taken aback. "I can't believe they're paying me for this?" I said to Jake over dinner one night, eager to express my delight. "That's great, Emily," he said, his tone preoccupied by his restaurant issues. "Just keep it quiet, okay? Mom and Sophia don't need to know about this." As I returned to the dishes, a notice appeared on my phone. Another comment. Another follower. Another step away from their disdain, and toward something perfectly commonplace yet utterly mine. "You're doing amazing, Emily. Thanks for sharing your journey." The comment reads, "My channel was no longer just a hobby, it was a thriving business, generating more revenue than Jake's floundering eatery." Soon, I was sending him $2,000 each month to cover household expenses, making it appear like his contribution. Despite my accomplishments, Anna and Sophia continued to treat me as a freeloader. "She does nothing around here, just prances about making her silly videos," Anna would spit when she thought I was out of earshot. Sophia repeated her mother's thoughts, adding her own remarks about how I should do more housework, like a real woman. Then Jake's restaurant had a hard period. One evening, he approached me, looking more weary than I'd seen him in months. "Emily, the restaurant needs a cash injection, badly. Can you help out?" His eyes were begging. I did not hesitate, transferring $10,000 for what he described as urgent developments. He was truly thankful. But it wasn't long before he started begging for more. "Just another $55,000 for the bills this month," he remarked quietly, almost humiliated. I consented because I could afford it, and he was still my son's father, whom he adored. But, deep down, I sensed the imbalance deepening. Not just financially, but also in our relationship. Life at Jake's family home was always difficult. But it became awful when Sophia married and brought her husband, Mark, into our home. The house was full. The house was full, and any sense of solitude or tranquility I had created for myself and my baby evaporated suddenly. Anna, never one to mince words, began calling me lazy and a parasite right in front of my face. "You do nothing around here," she'd say, as I struggled to balance my online business and keeping an eye on my baby. "Just taking up space." It didn't help that Sophia was expecting her first child, and Anna made it apparent that they wanted more space, hinting that my kid and I were in the way. "Soon there'll be another baby in the house, and we can't have freeloaders taking up space," Anna remarked one evening, her gaze drawn to my direction. The atmosphere became cooler, and then, just when things couldn't get much worse, Jake stated that he needed to leave town for a few weeks to handle essential restaurant affairs in another city. He packed up and went, hugging me and our baby goodbye, ignorant to the storm he would leave behind. I attempted to keep things normal by taking my son to school and finishing my videos in the park. However, the day everything actually went apart began like any other, until it didn't. After picking up my son from school, we walked home and spoke about his day. But when we turned the corner, my stomach fell. Our stuff was stacked up on the front doorway, including suitcases, bags of clothes, and even my son's toys. Confused and heartbroken, I rang the doorbell. Anna and Sophia approached the window with chilly looks, unmoved by the sight of a mother and kid stranded outside. They opened the door just enough to speak through, but not enough to let us in. "You need to find somewhere else to stay," Anna stated, her voice stern and uncompromising. I looked at her shocked. "What are you talking about? What about Jake? What will I tell him?" I asked, my voice rising with fear and rage. Sophia chuckled in a nasty, cutting tone. "Tell him whatever you want. He's not here to care, is he?" I frantically tried phoning Jake, But my calls remained unanswered. I had no alternative but to sink deeper into despair and hatred. With no other options, I gathered our belongings and secured a room at a neighboring motel. Sitting in that sterile, darkly lit room with my confused and upset son, I felt something shift inside me. This was more than simply a brief getaway. It was a forced eviction from a life I could no longer bear. I had just finished unpacking our things when my phone vibrated with a new message. It came from Sophia. That was strange. We rarely interacted directly, especially since the fallout. Her message was surprisingly cheerful. Thought you might want to see what your beloved husband has been up to. A link is also provided. My curiosity piqued. My anxiety increased in my chest. I clicked the link. It redirected me to a social media page with images of Jake. But not on a work trip. The photos showed him cozying up to another woman, having candlelight meals and strolling down the beach with his arms wrapped around her. What is the newest photo's timestamp? Just yesterday. I sat there numb, my phone slipping slightly from my grip as the realization dawned on me. Jake wasn't only away for business. He was living a completely different life, without us. Anger, hot and bitter, welled up inside me. But before I could drown in it, I felt a gentle tug on my sleeve. "Mommy, are you okay?" My son's sweet voice, filled with sincere compassion, drew me back from the edge. I feigned a smile and scooped him up in my arms. "Yeah, buddy, I'm okay. Just a little tired, that's all." I sat there, staring at the television, a mix of rage and betrayal running through me. All this time, I had been the financial backbone for Jake's faltering restaurant and his ungrateful family, who had essentially discarded me and my baby like garbage. And here he was, leading a double life, at my expense. My phone buzzed nonstop for the next week with Jake's calls. When I eventually spoke, his voice was filled with false worry. "Emily, where are you guys? I heard about what happened. You should come back. We have bills to sort out, and the restaurant needs more funding." His statements made my blood boil, but I maintained a neutral tone. "Sure, Jake, we can discuss it. I'll come by tomorrow." "Great, I really think it's best to handle these things in person," he said, relieved. After hanging up, I felt a chilly determination descend over me. He had no idea I knew about his affair. And he had no idea I had no intention of being the forgiving wife who paid his debts. Tomorrow's meeting would be pivotal, and I was prepared. Dropping up my son at school that morning felt like the quiet before the storm. As I traveled to my mother-in-law Anna's house, where Jake, Anna, and my pregnant sister-in-law Sophia would be waiting, my stomach churned with nervousness and determination. When I arrived, Jake appeared relieved, if not delighted to see me. Unlike Anna and Sophia, whose expressions were filled with dissatisfaction. I quickly dug out the divorce papers from my suitcase and presented them to Jake. As he scanned the paperwork, his eyes widened in disbelief. Anna and Sophia smirked, believing it was their victory. But when I turned to face them, the smirk evaporated instantly. "Don't be too quick to celebrate," I cautioned, my voice calm but sharp. "You've been living off my efforts all this time." Jake's face dropped as he confessed to them. "The restaurant, it isn't doing well. It hasn't been for a long time." Anna and Sophia's joy faded, replaced by horror and rage. They immediately turned on him, their earlier delight transforming into wrath. "You've been keeping this from us?" Anna yelled. Sophia yelled, "How could you let this happen?" They were angry not at Jake's lies, but at the loss of their financial safety net. Sophia, the arrogant one, scoffed at me. "Well, since Jake makes less than you, he'll just have to file for alimony. How's that for justice?" Jake perked up and nodded enthusiastically, as if he had just discovered a way to win. I nearly chuckled at the stupidity. "That's where you're wrong, Sophia," I corrected, turning to face them both. "And Jake, you won't see a cent from me, not for alimony, not for anything." Jake's arrogant grin vanished. "What? That's not how this works." "Oh, but it is," I answered. "Because I know about the affair." His face lost its color. "How did you?" I tilted my head, pretending innocence. "Your sister sent me everything, pictures, dates, and locations." I gestured to Sophia, whose face had turned pale. "Thanks to her, I have all the evidence I need." The room burst in turmoil. A flurry of accusations, denials, and frantic explanations flew between them. I let them sink in their own muck for a time before I spoke out. "Oh, and one more thing," I said, my voice frigid. "I'm taking back everything I paid for." The room became silent. Every appliance, every piece of furniture, everything. As truth dawned on them, their arguments came to an end. I'd previously arranged for movers. Anna and Sophia worried as they began carrying away the refrigerator, washing machine, flat-screen television, and even the beautiful blender I had purchased for them last Christmas. "You can't do this?" Anna exclaimed, gazing helplessly. "We need those things." I caught her gaze, my tone steady but not harsh. "I did this? And I need them too." The movers kept working, cleaning out about half of the house. As I watched them remove the last of my belongings, I felt lighter than I had in years. A weight lifted from my shoulders. I was no longer obligated to this house, these people, or their deception. I returned my gaze to Jake, who appeared little and forlorn, his hopes for quick money dashed. "Take care of your sister and mother, Jake. That's your job now," I murmured politely, turning to go. As I walked away, I realized it wasn't just a physical departure. It was my final step out of their deceptive clutches, a step toward regaining my life and ensuring a better future for my son and me. Overall, the divorce was a relief rather than a hardship. I battled for compensation for Jake's adultery and obtained alimony for our son. My lawyer handled everything, making the procedure run as smoothly as possible given the circumstances. Jake's family's lives changed considerably as well. Without my financial backing, his restaurant went bankrupt and couldn't survive. The family house was sold to pay off debts, demonstrating their unsustainable lifestyle. Meanwhile, Anna and Sophia scrambled to contact me, their messages a combination of apologies and desperate begs for aid. Despite everything, I couldn't allow myself to be drawn back into their madness. I immediately blocked their numbers. Sophia's husband abandoned her, and now the entire family, Jake, his mother, his sister, and her child, is crowded into a small rented apartment. They created this difficult position for themselves. In contrast, life for me and Alex is improving. We've fallen into a comfortable routine in our own rented flat, which feels more like home every day. My YouTube channel and Instagram page have taken off, resonating with women, particularly new mothers, who are striving to get back into shape. Seeing the beneficial impact of my work has sparked a new idea. Create online fitness courses designed exclusively for postpartum mothers. I'm enthused about the possibilities and the opportunity to assist others who have been in my position. There was a lot to accomplish, but for the first time in a long time, the future appeared bright and full of possibilities. I had a deep feeling of serenity here, in our tiny sanctuary, with my sons laughing booming off the walls. We had made it through the storm. And now was our turn to shine.
Brother made my life hell, then got my wife pregnant. Now he wants my help after our parents disowned him and left me their $2 million inheritance. My younger brother, David, has always harbored a deep-seated resentment towards me. If you think it stemmed from jealousy, you'd be wrong. He was the favored child, not me. There was no reason for him to be envious. To give you some context, our mother always indulged David. He was the golden child of our family. She cooked his meals, did his laundry, and even asked me to help him with his schoolwork. I was expected to assist him simply because we were family, but I never received the same consideration. I accepted this, as I was quite independent. Perhaps it was partly my fault for always meeting his needs without expecting anything in return. He never helped me when I needed it, and only approached me when he wanted something. While I was a quiet, introverted kid who enjoyed studying and keeping to myself, he was loud and rough, just like our dad. I also tend to be straightforward and honest, never sugarcoating things. I believe my mother may have developed a negative perception of me because of my straightforwardness. This favoritism made David the family's darling, and I didn't mind it while we were growing up. However, problems began when he started bullying and mocking me for being different from him. He would tease me about my height and the fact that I wore glasses. He would sneak into my room, read my diary, and then complain to my mom about what I had written. When I yelled at him and complained to our parents about him invading my privacy, they would laugh it off, saying it wasn't a big deal. He did more awful things, like nearly breaking my glasses and putting nasty things in my food. He even once put little stones in my cereal, but luckily, I found them before they could damage my teeth. When I told my mom, she dismissed it, saying this is how brothers bond. Whenever we fought, David would zero in on my insecurities to insult me. We went to the same school, so he knew I was being bullied by a few kids. Instead of supporting me, he sided with the bullies, calling me names like ugly loser or hairy monkey, and encouraging them to physically harm me, saying I was just a big failure. Another time, during a fight over something trivial that I can't even remember, he told me to kill myself. While I could easily brush off most insults, that one really hurt because I was struggling with my mental health at the time. I'm doing better now, but it was devastating to hear that my own brother wanted me dead. Since Dad was often at work and Mom didn't seem to care much, she even scolded me once, claiming it was my fault for irritating him. Things progressively worsened. During high school, There was a shocking incident when David attempted to set my hair on fire, and unbelievably, our mother defended him, claiming he was merely playing. Seriously, who behaves like that? Thankfully, my dad eventually sided with me and pointed out the gravity of the situation. He even threatened to call the police on David. This moment was a real eye-opener for my brother, as he had never faced any consequences for his actions before. He was genuinely stunned, and my dad made it clear that enough was enough and that David needed to start respecting his older brother. Later, Dad came into my room to talk. I never expected his support because he always told David how similar they were, which was true. Dad admitted that he had waited for years, hoping David would mature, but he was slowly realizing that David was becoming a big bully. Hearing this from my dad was incredibly validating, and I almost broke down in tears. I confessed everything David had done to me over the years and even mentioned the bullying at school. My dad was shocked at how much I had endured. The next day, he spoke to the principal to ensure the bullies were warned about severe consequences if they continued. Later that evening, Dad enrolled me in MMA at our local gym, telling me I needed to man up and stand up to bullies in my life. I admit that a nerdy kid like me trying to learn to fight might have seemed laughable, but I was very focused. I managed my time well to balance my studies and daily workouts, and the MMA classes completely changed my life and physique. One day, David was up to his antics again. He stole my pocket money, which we received for helping with chores. I had been saving it for a while. David sneaked into my room and took it. I caught him just as he was about to cycle off with his friends. I demanded he return my money, but David mocked me, saying all I could do was run to Daddy for help. I don't know what came over me, but I punched him in the face. He was stunned, fell backward, and I retrieved my money from his pocket before throwing him back down. David started crying loudly, which was quite comical. However, my mother rushed out to help him and find out what happened. When she learned I had fought him, she was surprised and reprimanded me, saying I should be a better role model for David, who seemed to enjoy seeing me scolded. My mother also complained to my dad about my behavior, saying I needed to be controlled. My dad grimly asked both of us to explain ourselves. I told him how David had stolen the money I had worked hard for and saved, while David tried to justify it by saying he needed the money for a date, and that as his brother, I should help him. However, Dad told David he was lucky I only punched him for stealing because anyone else would have called the police. He continued to tell David that he had no right to take others' things without their consent. David didn't like that and threw a tantrum, likely hoping our mother would side with him, but Dad remained firm. When David realized he wasn't going to be punished for being hit, he screamed how much he hated me and ran back to his room, locking himself in. Following that incident, David began to distance himself from me. He had finally understood that he couldn't bully me anymore, and that even Dad had stopped supporting his antics. For the first time in a long while, I felt like we were equals. Though he could no longer physically harm me, he resorted to verbal insults when our parents weren't around. His behavior worsened with age, becoming angrier and more short-tempered each year. When I approached him with a question, he would ignore me and walk away, muttering insults like nerd or loser under his breath. If he needed to communicate something, he would relay it through our mother instead of speaking to me directly. When I questioned her about why David couldn't just talk to me, she would urge me to be more understanding. I couldn't tell if it was just puberty or genuine hatred. Over time, dealing with his comments became unbearable, and I longed to move out and get away from him. I repeatedly asked my mother to mediate a sit-down conversation for us to resolve our issues, but she always refused, saying she didn't want to get involved. When I asked her opinion on why David treated me this way, she would brush off the question. Eventually, I left for my dream university, having earned a scholarship as a top student. My dad threw a party for me, and even my mom seemed proud. However, David remained aloof and distant, barely acknowledging my achievements. The day I left for university was a mix of excitement for the future and relief to escape the toxic home environment. The first few months at university were liberating. I made new friends, enjoyed my classes, and started to build a life separate from the oppressive atmosphere of my childhood. The constant fear of David's verbal attacks lifted, giving me a newfound sense of peace. During my second year, I met my wife Karen at a frat party through a friend, and we immediately clicked. Coming from a religious background, having kids outside of marriage was frowned upon. However, when we discovered she was pregnant in our final year, we decided to marry right after graduation. Our wedding was a small but joyful ceremony. Our parents were happy for us, and we enjoyed the celebration. At that moment, I believed Karen was the love of my life. I had always envisioned a monogamous relationship, one woman to come home to and share my life with. Despite other women showing interest over the years, I never pursued anything because I was genuinely content in my marriage. Karen was my dream girl, and I never wanted to hurt her. However, I later uncovered 2 incidents of infidelity in our marriage. One was an intermittent affair with her married co-worker that spanned several years, and the other was a brief fling with an ex-boyfriend during a visit to her family. Some might think I was naive, and looking back, I can't completely disagree. Each time we separated for a while, I chose to forgive my wife. I didn't want to raise our child in a broken home and believed we could overcome these obstacles. The affair with her co-worker happened when we were young, and I attributed it to youthful mistakes and poor judgment. For a period, things seemed to get better. Although I could never fully trust her again, I did my best to set aside my doubts, knowing that if I chose to forgive, I had to genuinely work toward a fresh start. It's been 4 years since her second betrayal, and I felt confident in my decision to give her another chance. Karen seemed to have changed, and we were genuinely happy, planning our family's future. However, 3 months ago, my world was shattered once more when she revealed that she had been having a long-term affair and suggested that our son might not be mine. Her words struck me like a ton of bricks. A mix of shock, betrayal, and disbelief overwhelmed me. I struggled to comprehend the enormity of her confession. In a daze, I managed to ask why she had kept such a significant secret and how she could have done something so devastating. Her reaction was cold and indifferent, as if she were detached from the pain she caused. Her vague responses left me with more questions than answers. It was a surreal and painful moment, confronting the shattered trust and uncertainty about my own family. I continued to press Karen for the truth because I felt I deserved to know the father of the child I had been raising since birth. Ultimately, she admitted it was David. My eyes widened in shock as I asked Karen what she meant. She explained that she and David had become friends when I introduced her to my family, and she stayed with us from Thanksgiving until New Year's. David, usually cold to me, was warm and polite towards her, which made me glad because I didn't want Karen to feel unwelcome. Karen wanted to be accepted into my family, so she spent significant time with my mom whenever possible. She noticed the rift between David and me and questioned me about it. I opened up about our strained relationship and explained that we might never repair it due to his unresolved feelings. Karen understood but started including David in our outings, hoping it would help us bond. Whenever we planned to watch a movie, she invited David, and we watched whatever he chose. During this time, David and I exchanged a few words, which was an improvement compared to his usual silent treatment. I remember Karen and David hanging out and playing video games together, but I never thought much of it. Karen told me that one day, David opened up to her about his struggles and a recent breakup. Feeling vulnerable, he struck up a friendship with her. She mentioned that he would harmlessly flirt with her when I wasn't around, and eventually, things escalated beyond her control. The vision of my wife and brother sleeping together made me feel sick. Karen confessed that she felt guilty afterward and left him, which matched her abrupt decision to go home instead of spending New Year's with me. Although I tried to convince her to stay, she was adamant about leaving. When we met back at college after the holidays, she was her usual cheerful self, so I didn't question anything. 2 weeks later, we found out she was pregnant. Karen admitted she didn't know if the child was mine or David's, and with no way to prove it, she chose to stay with me, knowing I was the more dependable brother. This was why we got married. My world felt like it was crashing down. The son I loved might not even be mine. I asked Karen if she had been sleeping with David recently, and she slowly nodded. She revealed that they had always stayed in touch because their chemistry was undeniable. They would sneak off to hotels, lying to me about working overtime. She admitted that half of her business trips were actually romantic getaways with him. I asked why she married me if she wanted my brother, and Karen said she didn't want to be the one to break off the marriage. She saw me as a wonderful father to our son and decided to stay. In her words, she made a mistake and didn't know when to stop. I told Karen I was glad she told me the truth but that I was going to pack up and leave. She started crying, asking for forgiveness, and expected me to yell at her. Instead, I calmly packed my clothes. Karen insisted that if I loved her, I should fight for her and that mistakes happen in every marriage. When she realized I wasn't going to do anything, she changed tactics, saying our son would be affected by a divorce and that children shouldn't be raised in broken homes. I reminded her that I might not even be the father, which made her cry more and accuse me of being cruel. It seemed like she believed nothing could make me want to leave the marriage. Perhaps it was partly my fault for letting things slide in the past. While I did love her, it felt more like it stemmed from thinking we had a son together and had been together since college. Karen kept insisting it wasn't too late to fix things, but I struggled to believe her and had no patience left. Trust was a major issue, and her words felt hollow. Even if I forgave her, I could never forget she slept with my brother. I've always believed in forgiving mistakes because we're all flawed, but this was beyond acceptable limits. I left her crying on the doorstep and checked into a hotel. The next day, I went straight to my parents and revealed everything about my wife's affair with David, explaining how they had been secretly sleeping together for years. The shock on their faces was undeniable. True to her nature, my mother initially tried to defend David, insisting that her boy could never do such a thing to his own brother. Determined to expose the truth, I asked my parents to remain silent and let me call David in front of them. I instructed them to stay quiet so I could catch David off guard, making him believe it was a private conversation. When David answered the phone, I confronted him about the affair. At first he vehemently denied it, refusing to accept any responsibility. However, when I told him that Karen had admitted to everything, he started blaming her, calling her characterless. He claimed it wasn't his fault if women were attracted to him and that he was the better-looking brother. I told him firmly that I would expose him to everyone. When David mocked me, saying no one would believe me because he was the golden child, I scoffed at his arrogance and thanked him for confirming the truth, knowing our parents had heard everything. David went quiet and then spluttered, trying to explain himself and salvage his image. My mother, still in shock, demanded an explanation from David. He stuttered through a feeble attempt to justify his actions, blaming everyone else but himself and desperately trying to shift the blame onto Karen. I could see my mother, who had once been protective of her favored son, now felt a mix of disappointment and anger. In that charged moment, I felt a strange sense of vindication. For years, I had endured David's torment. Now, the truth was out, and the roles were reversed. It was David who stood exposed, his actions laid bare for everyone to see. As David's words faltered, my father, usually reserved in his expressions, couldn't contain his disappointment. He asked me to pass him the phone and began to speak to David. "David," my father began, his voice laden with disappointment. "What you've done isn't just a betrayal of your brother, but a betrayal of this family. You slept with your brother's wife and continued the affair even after they were married. Your actions have severe consequences and have irreversibly shattered the trust we had in you. I raised both of you to value family, loyalty, and decency. What you've shown today defies everything I've tried to teach you." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink into David's conscience. "Your disregard for your brother's feelings and the lack of respect for his marriage are unacceptable. You've not only hurt him but also torn apart the bonds that hold our family together. Your mother and I are partly to blame for what you've become, but we will no longer tolerate this behavior. From today, you're cut off from the college funds I set up for you. You'll have to figure out how to pay your university fees on your own. I will also stop funding your lifestyle. Do you think it makes you more of a man to sleep with married women? Let's see how you manage without my money." Throughout this, I maintained a composed demeanor. Although I initially wanted to scream at David, watching my dad punish him was the ultimate vindication. I had exposed his true nature, and it was clear he had underestimated the consequences. My mother, despite David's persistent protests, continued to justify him, but my father swiftly ended the call, shutting down David's attempts to explain away his actions. Afterward, my mom approached me and hugged me. It had been a long time since we shared such a moment, but in that embrace, there was an unspoken understanding and support amid the family turmoil. She apologized for not believing me all this time. My 14-year-old self could never have imagined this moment, being vindicated and embraced by my mother. Following this, my dad helped me find a good lawyer to divorce Karen. She and her lawyer tried to fight dirty, asking for alimony since I earned more than her. But her affair played heavily in my favor. We also conducted a paternity test, and it was confirmed that David was indeed the father of the child. The news was incredibly painful, even worse than discovering Karen's infidelity. I was furious that the son I had loved and raised wasn't mine. However, I decided to stay strong. Karen begged me to continue visiting my son, arguing he shouldn't be punished for the situation, but I couldn't bear to see him. He reminded me too much of David, and I hated it. After my divorce was finalized, I felt a sense of freedom wash over me as I moved into my own bachelor pad. It felt surreal to live alone since I had married so young and never really had the chance to experience independence. However, my naturally independent nature allowed me to quickly adapt to my new lifestyle, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. 2 weeks ago, my dad called to tell me he was considering changing his will because he didn't want to leave anything to David. My dad is incredibly stubborn, and once he decided to cut David out of his life, he stuck to it. David tried reaching out to our parents and even showed up at their doorstep, begging for forgiveness, but they refused to let him in. Even my mother, who usually gave in to David's tantrums, seemed done with him, though it must have been hardest for her. David never texted me to apologize for what he had done, showing he didn't regret his actions. He was just upset about being cut off from our parents. Dad told me he planned to leave everything to me, ensuring David wouldn't contest it later. He would leave David only $1. My eyes widened in shock as my dad had worked hard his entire life. Including his assets, retirement fund, and life insurance, the total came to nearly $2 million. The only condition in his will was that if my dad passed away before my mom, she would continue living in their house, even though ownership would transfer to me. I didn't mind this, as I wanted to care for my mom in her final days. Somehow, David found out about this, and, unable to reach our parents, called me yesterday, trying to make amends. He explained how he was struggling with college and that after Karen discovered the paternity of the child, she had been pestering him for child support. He said he had no money and was looking for part-time jobs but couldn't find anything. He begged me to talk to our family to start fresh since he really needed my help. I laughed in his face and told him I was done with him. I reminded him that he should have thought about the consequences before sleeping with my wife and getting her pregnant. David argued that I was being unfair and that Karen was also to blame, to which I agreed. I reminded him that I had divorced her, making her his responsibility now. He shouldn't be calling me to complain about her or the child since these were the consequences of his own actions. David started to raise his voice, but I interrupted, reminding him that he was no longer the favored child in the family but the black sheep who had slept with his own brother's wife. At that moment, David began to cry, telling me how everyone, including our grandparents and relatives, had turned against him. While this was true, it was no longer my concern. I told him we were done and that he should never call me again since I no longer considered him my brother. Since then, I've replayed the conversation in my mind. Despite my hatred for my brother, I had never heard him cry, at least not since we were kids. I won't lie. It did hurt me a bit to see him so helpless. So, I guess I'm here to ask if I should talk to our parents about him or if I would be an asshole if I don't. Update 1. Hi everyone, many of you have been asking why I am no longer in contact with my son Henry, and some have even called me cruel. I need to explain that I am not comfortable raising another man's child. This isn't a stepson situation. I was led to believe Henry was my son, only to later discover he is actually my brother David's son. Naturally, this revelation hurt deeply, and I cried over it for days. The main reason I don't want any contact with Henry is that I no longer want Karen in my life. If I remain connected to her child, she will find a way to re-enter my life, and I need my space. You may think I'm cruel or selfish, but I can't see him ever again, at least not for a very long time. Update 2. Most of you correctly guessed that it was my mother who informed David about my dad changing his will, leading David to call me as a last resort to fix things. I confronted her in front of my dad, and she broke down, saying I had punished David enough and that he had learned his lesson. My dad firmly told my mother that if she believed what David did was forgivable, then he could no longer stay married to her because he could never forgive such a betrayal. This threat silenced my mother. My dad made it clear that if she ever talked with David again and we found out, she could pack her bags and leave. As I mentioned, my dad is very stubborn. Hopefully my mother will learn from her mistakes. Update 3. Reddit. It's been 5 months since my last update. My relationship with my parents has improved over the past few months. My dad and I go golfing every weekend, and he treats me more like a buddy than a son. Although my mother misses David, she has stayed away from him. The last I heard about David was from my cousin, who said David had been asking everyone for money, and eventually had to drop out of college because he couldn't afford the fees. He and Karen are living together, and he has a part-time job as a mechanic. Apparently they are raising Henry together, which is a good thing I guess. I never discuss David with my parents, and they don't bring him up either. For everyone asking, I am doing quite well. I was promoted at my job 2 months ago, so my salary has significantly improved. I haven't been dating anyone as I feel I still need time and space to heal. I've been going to therapy, so we'll see how that works out.